is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. He's more partial to the town than he is the asylum, Stu Horvath.
It's true. I do kind of love that that's sort of like, I mean, until like Lovecraft really like blew up into the pop cultural zeitgeist, that Arkham Asylum was like one of the big, in Batman, was one of the big sort of inroads for him, big reference, that I think that lots of people know Arkham Asylum and aren't aware of the larger Lovecraft universe that it's referring to, which I think is pretty great.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting and we're getting a little ahead, but whatever. It's definitely interesting, like, having grown up reading Batman and knowing Batman, obviously, as a child, from like, the beginning of like Batman 66 all the way up until like The Killing Joke and all the stories that came after, Legends of the Dark Knight. Like, I'd never heard of H.P. Lovecraft, as a little kid and a teenager, but Batman Arkham Asylum, like I knew what Arkham was. When you hear the word Arkham, it really truly is, I would say for the majority of people, synonymous with Asylum because of Batman. Yeah. However, it does have like a much richer history, and as far as like an origin goes, very much a very specific time and place that comes from Lovecraft. So we are talking today about
Arkham.
Tee that right up for you.
Yeah. I do want to mention that just because we brought it up, Arkham Asylum first appeared in Batman in 1974. So it does predate our lives. I'm pretty sure it was Denny O'Neil who
I think it was
brought it in. And it's great because you name it Arkham, and if you know the word, if you recognize the name, it does a whole lot of heavy lifting about what that place is and how it's going to feel going forward. And I think that it does bring a little bit of the outer to Batman in a cool way.
Which, if it's established in 74, a lot of that audience would have been more familiar with H.P. Lovecraft's work. Right?
Yeah, I think that, like Lovecraft was sort of having like the beginning of his pop cultural moment was in like 72, 73 with the Lynn Carter's Ballantine Adult Fantasy. And
right.
So like, yeah, it was starting then.
So it's so wild that like one single word does so much of, and you're correct in the statement, heavy lifting for a property.
It's weird. But that's also Denny O'Neil. He was a really smart writer and editor. And I think that a lot of our perception of Batman post Denny is all because of Denny.
100%. 100%.
Like even just the idea of him being the greatest detective, like that's really Denny O'Neil.
Yeah, let's not forget that, folks. Great detective doesn't kill. I said what I said.
All right. Anyway, enough comic stuff. We're talking about Arkham, the town, which is central location in H.P. Lovecraft stories, fictional town in Massachusetts, sort of modeled a little bit like on Salem, kind of, although it's inland and has a river instead of a port. I've traveled around Massachusetts quite a bit, and I've never really found something that was a satisfying sort of like, oh yeah, that's what he was thinking of. I think that maybe, Providence is also a pretty good stand-in for Arkham. Again, although Arkham is not a coastal city, it's on a river. But yeah, so a lot of Lovecraft stories are set in or around Arkham. A lot of the most famous ones. It's like one of his most iconic creations. So, of course, it's going to be in the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. So this book actually has a little bit of a long history. We've talked a little bit about it in the past on a previous episode. There was the Lovecraft Country kind of series of source books in the 90s that Chaosium put out, helmed by Keith Herber, and then taken over later on in the line by Kevin A. Ross. And basically, it was a source book for each of Lovecraft's iconic towns. It started with Arkham Unveiled. Then it was Return to Dunwich, which were both Keith Herber projects. And then Kingsport City in the Mists was Kevin A. Ross, and Escape from Innsmouth was Kevin A. Ross at each of them. is highly detailed in terms of like the town, its layout, and its inhabitants, and its history. They're really in-depth source books. Truly, some of my favorite books in role-playing games. Just so good, so detailed, so interesting, with the exception of the Arkham book, honestly. I think that Arkham Unveiled, the first book, it's important because it sets the template for these later books, and it's a really strong foundation. But I think that it is in building that foundation, it sort of is a little bit more prosaic, a little bit more boring, and it has to be because it is the more prosaic of the towns. Like it's the one that's the most normal, despite all of the weird stuff that goes on there. You know, like Miskatonic University is there. It's a big town. It is not as one with its secrets and mysteries as, say, like Dunwich or Innsmouth or even Kingsport. Kingsport is interesting because it's sort of like Lovecraft didn't write a whole lot about it, so Ross got to kind of go and make it its own thing. So that one's sort of like an outlier, I think. But Innsmouth and Dunwich are so synonymous with their horrible mysteries, whereas Arkham is a place where people live, which is also true of those other towns. But like those other towns, the people who are living there are all sort of embroiled in it, whereas there's just normal people in Arkham. There's like I said, there's a university, hundreds of kids learning things. Granted, they could be learning evil things, but that's only a small segment of the student body. That
Just
is,
a smidgen.
yeah. So Arkham Unveiled is fine. It's I would say a workman-like book. It does the job. It establishes Arkham as a place. It lays out the city, the street plans and everything. Like basically every building is accounted for and residents are detailed. It's wild how detailed Arkham Unveiled is. And then there's a bunch of scenarios in the back, which are pretty good. And then there's a couple other versions of that that have come out since. I think it was like 160 pages was the first one, and then they called it the complete, but I think they meant compact Arkham Unveiled, in which they took the scenarios out and just made it the source book standalone. And that one kind of sucks. And then they reissued it again, I think is just H.P. Lovecraft's Arkham. That was maybe the early 2000s. Expanded the material that's in it. Unfortunately, filled it with all this god-awful digital art.
Ugh.
Like that early 2000s, like, oh, we've got Poser. Let's just use Poser. It'll make things look like we made it in 2003, and it'll never look good after that point.
So dated. Ugh.
Very dated, very muddy. The material is great, but like it's just it's such an ugly book that I've just never it's not great. And I've always recommended that folks get that first one if they're going to get one. But now, in the year of our Lord 2024, Chaosium has done it again. The 4th edition of Arkham. Now it's just called Arkham. The whole line, the greater line of source books, of which this is the first, is now called Arkham Unveiled, which I think is a kind of odd name because I'm assuming that they're going to do Dunwich and Innsmouth, and those aren't Arkham. But, you know, I get it. It's fine. It's branding.
Might be like Dunwich, the horror. Innsmouth, the shadow.
I like that, actually.
That's actually pretty good.
But I actually don't know what the whole line is going to shape up to be. It might be more like Lovecraft Country was after the source books. They did a bunch of scenario books, which are great. So maybe they're going to do that. Maybe they're going to do both. Whatever. I'm here for it, is what I'm saying. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to buy them, as I do with everything that Chaosium puts out.
It's kind of a thing.
Yeah, but Arkham is great. It is basically just like everything else that Chaosium has done when they've looked back. This is a huge renovation of the original product. Mike Mason at the helm, as he usually is, really rebuilding and recontextualizing and just digging into Herber's original work and bringing it up to, modern polish, modern standards 30 years later. It's great because it feels everything that I liked about Arkham Unveiled is in here. There's the witch cult is one of the main focuses where Keziah Mason has from Dreams in the Witch House is a witch. She's dead, but she's also not quite dead. And she has like a little human-faced rat as a familiar. Horrible. And so like she's in the story, a Lovecraft story, Dreams of the Witch House, which is a famous one, which is set in Arkham, where she like gets this college student and like, you know, uses him to come back to life. But she is also the head of a larger witch cult in town, which is Herbert's invention. And there's all these people who are like seemingly normal people who are also part of this coven. And that's great. That's one of the cool things in the original book that's here, that's expanded upon. We get a little bit more meat of what they do and how they do it, and things that you could use as scenario hooks. But then on top of the good stuff that Herbert created, there's so much more new stuff. And, you know, like I have both books, so I feel like I'm getting to eat my cake and have it too, kind of. I did that wrong. I have my cake and get to eat it too. It really amounts to more good stuff. And the new stuff is great. One of the key things that changes in this is Herbert's books were set in 1928, and that sort of sets the clock after most of Lovecraft's stories that are set in Arkham, and maybe in the middle of a couple. Whereas this book is now set in 1922, so almost everything, with the exception of the Randolph Carter stories, is in the future. So keepers have the option of kind of incorporating or messing with the established Lovecraft canon, which is cool. I think I prefer it the other way, but that might just be because I'm used to it. Back in 1990, I might have been like really sad that The Color Out of Space was already wrapped up. I don't remember. But this way you can have your players kind of get involved with Walter Gilman in the Witch House, or you could get involved with Dr. Armitage at Miskatonic University before he goes to Dunwich. The whole idea of the second volume that Herbert did was Return to Dunwich. You kind of mop up after Armitage's mess. That book is fantastic, but I can also understand why you would look at that and be like, yeah, but you could just go to Arkham, you could just go to Dunwich and like make that the adventure. Dunwich Horror is basically is the template for a Call of Cthulhu scenario in a lot of ways. So why not make that available should the players desire? And that's what this does by shifting it back to 1922. So there's a lot of new material and there's a lot of old material. And the best part about it is I really can't tell what is what. Like the blending is very well done. There's signposts that let me know like, oh, that's new, or like that's like differently context. But overall, like I feel like this is both old and new, and it just works together very well. I feel like it's rare that we go back and we can capture the essential spirit of a thing and not dilute it, while also modernizing it and bringing it back and kind of making it work anew and feel new and exciting. Chaosium actually has done a really good job of that with this whole 7th edition under Mike Mason. I think that more RPGs with legacies should maybe kind of look at that. There's parts in the line where like it could have been done better, but overall I think like a book like Arkham it's so good. It does everything that it sets out to do very well. It also, I have to point out, is it looks better or newer. There's a new design, like a graphic design quality to it, that I think it started maybe with the Vermont campaign, which the name escapes me. A Time for Harvest, A Time to Harvest, whatever. You got the gist. And there's just like a new graphic sensibility that this book and the Cults book and that book, they all have like a really nice clean look. Previous 7th edition books have like this, it's printed on old paper kind of look, which is fine. But this actually, it looks fresh and new, and there's like there's something about the graphic presentation that makes it readable and referenceable in a way that I find very nice. I feel like there was a point with Call of Cthulhu where I was sort of like, oh, I wish there was more bullet points and charts and information was broken out less in prose paragraphs. And you know what? This book's got bullet points.
How wonderful is that? Yo, bullet points, man. Highly, highly, highly underrated.
Yeah, there's bullet points. Everything's sectioned a little bit differently. Like it's a lot easier to reference There's some cool stuff where basically every NPC, and you get about 80 NPCs, all with interesting histories and story hooks and stuff. And each of them is sort of like they're tied to their house, their address, or their place of work. And then so you get a rundown of the building, and then you get a notation of who lives there or works there, or goes through there, and is otherwise notable associated with that building. And then you'll get like notes on the strangeness or potential strangeness that those people and building are involved in. And then sometimes you get a look to the future, which I think is great. Because it kind of like it makes the place come alive in a way that I was not expecting to it. That they are easily my favorite part of the book in a way, because it's sort of like it's, at the end of a movie where you've like really invested in these characters, and like it fades to black, and then you get and then they got married and went to, they moved to Skokie, Illinois, and everything was cool, and you get that feeling of like, oh yeah, now I really know the complete picture of this person or this story, and then the credits roll. It's like getting that feeling for every character, but not having to wait to the end of the movie.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that so much.
There's one character who's a sex worker, and I love the presentation for her, because she's just like, yeah, my husband died, and it's a way to get around, and like there's no moralizing around it, and she has some high-powered clientele in the town, and her look to the future is that they eventually name a street after her, and it's something that she like really likes in her older years. I love that character detail. It's so good, and it's so well thought out and fits into the larger picture of the town. And all of them are like that, even when they're spooky. And it just makes the town come alive in a way that I think is cool.
Yeah, man, I think that's something that's like very special, and something that like you could only get by having like a very rich history of the world around you, like in a way that you can make people care about it. Because if you think about like, all right, I'm going to tell all these little stories about all these people that in the grand scheme of things are kind of inconsequential to the overall, like what's happening in whatever book that you're reading in particular. But it really fleshes out the richness of the world as a whole, that like, if you are playing these games and you're on these adventures, this is going to be like a dandy little walk through the town square for you, because now you've got more narrative threads to pull. Now, if you're going to be telling your own stories, there's so many different ways you could take something and also like flesh out these characters that maybe by and large would not be privy to the overall spookiness and, terror that's kind of going around for certain people in the town in certain places. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it's funny. The NPC that I just mentioned, her name is Melissa Thorne, and I just happened to get to the page. The look to the future. In 1935, a gentleman friend names a new Arkham Street after her, a great source of pride in her later years. And on the other page, and I'm not quite sure I haven't read everything in detail. There's two characters. One's a younger woman, and her stat block is labeled the jailer, Beatrice Allen's mind and Ellen Crawford's body. And she looks sort of, well put together and mean. And then there's an unhinged looking woman who's labeled the prisoner, Ellen Crawford's mind in Beatrice Allen's body. And it's just like, yeah, that's a riff on Lurker at the Threshold and mind switching and stuff. But it's just, I love the proximity of these two things, where it's just like one's a fairly normal human being and the other's this supernatural drama. And they share space so well. And everything works. It fits together. Nothing about it is jarring. It's cool. The world comes alive, right? And it works off of. There's such a huge body of work and history and lore that I think that you could come to a book like this in 2024 and pick what you want and really make it all shine together. Like I was a little bummed. I think I've told this story on the show before, but like my first Lovecraft story wasn't a Lovecraft story. It was a story that was anthologized in Helen Hoke's Devils, Devils, Devils. Helen Hoke made these books that were basically anthologies for libraries. And I took it out, and it's got these great illustrations. And the last story in it is Witch's Hollow, which in the anthology is listed as by H.P. Lovecraft, but it's not. It's an August Derleth story that was written in the 60s based on some notes from H.P. Lovecraft's Commonplace book. However, it's really, really, really like Call of Cthulhu-y. And it's the first time I experienced like Cthulhu stuff in fiction. and it's set in Arkham. And I believe, and I know I'm like 95% certain that Witch's Hollow is detailed in the Herber Arkham Unveiled. It's not in this book. Does that make me sad on some point? Yeah, because I like Witch's Hollow and I have a connection to that kind of not great story. And I was tickled when it was in Arkham Unveiled, and it's not in this one, and that makes me a little sad.
Oh,
But at the same time, like, who cares? Like, there's also so much good stuff in here that, like, I don't need the shout out to my special Lovecraft story, right? And that's what I think is cool about this book, is that it isn't afraid to kind of push past what people expect to find in the book. One of the biggest things about this book is the fact that, like, there's been an Arkham map, I think, since at least, let's say, 1983, included in the rule books and box sets and stuff, a map of Arkham that's kind of based, I think, on Providence. Anyway, and it is burned into my brain. It's a 40-year-old map that's gotten use from hundreds of players at hundreds of tables. They changed it. And, like, I can see how people might not like it. I can see how the idea of doing that, you might balk at that as a company, and they didn't. And I really appreciate that they didn't, because it made me take my preconceptions and be like, okay, I'm going to set these aside and I'm just going to, like, enjoy this book for what it is. They obviously are changing things. It's like it's a big signal that, like, this is not the book that you necessarily expect, while also it's also nice to see, like, they still have French Hill, like Miskatonic University is still there, so there's still this sense of the familiar. So it's at once sort of like telling you this is going to be different, but also, like, there's enough here that's familiar. And I think that is generally when Chaosium looks back and renovates these older titles for the new line, that's the approach, and I think that they do that very well. And this book is no exception. This is as good as and I'm only about halfway through it. It's harder to read than the Cults of Cthulhu book, because it's just I have trouble reading, like, this many NPCs in, like, a sitting, whereas, like, I tore through that Cults of Cthulhu book, like, in one night. But everything that I've read is great and interesting and makes me want. I've never wanted to. I like Call of Cthulhu scenarios. I like running them. I don't like homebrewing Call of Cthulhu. I don't know if I just never felt the knack for it, or honestly, there's just so many scenarios out there that are good that I don't need to. But this book drops the scenarios. There's no scenarios in it, but there's lots of material to make your own, and it really is a sandbox, an open world Arkham. They have, it's so cool. They have a reputation mechanic that you could bolt on. So, like the more you interact with people, this is sort of an expansion on credit rating, which is an old Call of Cthulhu skill that is supposed to work like this, where like it works as sort of like a catch-all for your reputation and your class and your financial clout. But this actually has like a matrix of things that you could kind of feed into it to determine, based on your actions and interactions with people, and how your proximity to spooky stuff and rumor and all that stuff, and it all kind of spits out like your standing in the community. And I love stuff like that. And it makes me want to play this as like a West Martian style, like sandbox where it's just a bunch of hapless investigators in town getting into trouble, dying, going crazy, and maybe burning the whole place down.
I love it. Oh God, I love it.
It's so good.
All right, so do you have any final thoughts on Arkham?
It just keeps giving. Not only are there two different maps, one's like player facing, one's keeper facing. There's also, in the tradition of the original Arkham Unveiled, which had a small faux newspaper of the Arkham Advertiser. There is a broadsheet Arkham Advertiser tucked in the back of this, created by the folks at the Lovecraft Historical Society. And it's great. It's even better than the one, it uses vintage text and type and advertisements. And it's full of Arkham flavor. And it reminds me that the Arkham wallet that we talked about earlier last year ties in with this. Like they made those props in that wallet to nest with this book. And that makes it just even more cool, live, real, bustling. Like the vibes are there. There's a big soup of like stuff that you could draw on and make this thing kind of like just work. And it's very cool. And you should check it out if you are into Call of Cthulhu.
Well, very cool. Like we know that they're going to put out these really cool books. And like, although they did not include your special Cthulhu story, Chaosium, if you're listening, just saying.
A little expansion.
Little baby expansion.
Put it up as a PDF on the website.
Yeah, why not, man?
Yeah.
And you know what people will do? They eat it up because people who like Cthulhu love that stuff.
It's true.
So this is another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG. You can bet your butts that I'm going to post about this in October of 2025.
Very cool. You can find me across the internet at John McGuire RPG. You could mostly find me on Instagram. I'm posting more because I'm actually leaving the house. I'm going places. I was just at GaryCon where I had an absolute blast. Folks, if there's one con you want to go to, you want to go to GaryCon. GaryCon is a hell of a good time. It's super chill. The scenery outside of the convention is gorgeous that you could look out and see from every single window. And it just a great vibe. I can't recommend it enough. I actually want to give a quick shout out. I just was reading on Rascal yesterday that they announced the cast for the Dungeons and Dragons, the 20-sided tavern live theatrical experience. And wouldn't you know, our editor, our long-suffering editor, Alex Murray, is going to be a part of the cast. Our Alex Murray, he's going to be a part of the cast.
Get out of town.
Yeah, for sure. It's happening. He mentioned it to me a little while back, and this is the kind of thing where he'd be like, Hambone, I got to go out of town because I'm working on something. Can you get me the episodes like by this date, and I'll try to work on it. And it's been going on for a little while, but it just got picked up. Curious Hedgehog and Showpath Entertainment, under license from Wizard of the Coast and Daddy Hasbro, are thrilled to announce the cast of Dungeons & Dragons D&D live theatrical production, The 20-Sided Tavern. It's pretty cool. It is going to be starting previews at Stage 42 in New York City on Friday, April 19th, and an official opening of Sunday, May 5th, 2024. You can check out tickets on sale at the20sidedtavern.com. Our Alex Murray, our homie, we're super excited. And I told him we got to get him on to talk about it. So hopefully at some point in the near future, which is going to be funny, we're going to have him on the episode as a guest, and then we're going to make him edit that episode.
No vacations, Alex.
No vacations for you, man. But super excited for you, buddy. And can't wait to get out there and support you at the 20sidedtavern.com. Check it out. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. If you really like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/vintagerpg. We got a behind-the-scenes look at Stu's books and whatever he's working on. We got a behind-the-scenes look at what I'm working on, be it 3-2-1 Action or the Brain Eaters Zombie Survival RPG. We got early episodes for a little dollars a month. Stu's got a tier to play West Marches with Stu. I've got a monthly tier where you can play RPGs with your old buddy HB. And we've got a killer Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. If you're trolling around on the Kickstarter, you still got some time left to back Mystic Punks. I played it at GaryCon. I played it before, but I played it with Jay, the Dark Eye Jay, one of the creative minds behind it at GaryCon, and it was a rowdy good time. It's the kind of fantasy RPG that will bring you back to your buddy's basement, having some great laughs with friends and doing some real weird stuff. So if you haven't backed it yet, Mystic Punk's still on Kickstarter for a little while longer. And by the time you hear this episode, it'll be dropping on my 45th birthday. So another one around the sun for your old buddy HB. And I want to say thank you very much to everyone who came up to me at GaryCon to talk about the Vintage RPG. There was shockingly a lot of you. And
we're famous
somewhat. I think in the circuit of like RPGs, like I'm like a G-list celebrity.
H-list, come on.
I'm an H-list celebrity, but I'm a V-list everywhere else. But yeah, thank you so much for coming up to us for me and chatting me up about the Vintage RPG podcast, 3-2-1 Action, talking about how much you love Stu's book. It's something that we never get tired of hearing about, and it's something that really makes us appreciate. Because I don't want to call you fans, I call you listeners, because honestly, like, I'll shoot the breeze with any of you when you come up and say hi. And we wouldn't be doing the show for as long as we have without you. So thank you so much for stopping by on your busy CarryCon schedule when you saw me walking around the hall. And I know you noticed the hair, and I appreciate that. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.